Perfect. Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. As you begin coming into our room, we appreciate your patience. We had just a small little technical issues on the front side here, but we're excited that you're going to be joining us. My name is Anisa Aven, and I'm going to hand it over to David and Robert.
Hey, so David Whitmarsh here. Hopefully you guys have seen me in a couple of the sessions earlier today along with Anisa. And what Anisa, there's a message here for you. So today we're going to talk, at the end of the day, we're really just going to talk about where to start when you are doing any initiative, really, but this one happens to be around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And how do you know whatever path you take, if it's successful, if you don't have, the baseline metrics to start from, right? And what I guess this is the third session that we've sort of talked about, covering some of these metrics and how important it is if you really plan on measuring success. Truthfully, if you're on here or anybody in your team, is just wanting to check the boxes, to say we did it because that's the only budget you're going to have, then this session's probably not for you, to be perfectly honest with you. But if you're really looking to make a difference, move the bar, grow as an organization, then we hope that you'll enjoy this session. So one of the things that is critical is to really just identify where your organization is. And if you don't have the ability, the knowledge, any of those sorts of things, then you don't really even know where to start. Then always recommend starting with your finding out how your organization is measured. So, I'll kick this over to Robert and say, what you probably more than anybody, because really gathering this data is sort of your specialty. What kind of, I almost swore there. What kind of messes do you see when some organizations reach out to you and sort of want to figure out, what to do? Like, I imagine they come in different models, pretty mature, to have no clue what we're doing.
Yeah, as organizations come to us, as you mentioned, I have a couple things that just popped in my head that I love to share. And that is that, you can't fix what you don't understand. That's one of my favorite little, like, my personal mission statements almost, is that, look, if I don't understand it, then I don't have the ability to actually take the actions and address it. And so you've got to start with good data. Like when I decide I want to lose weight, well, what's the first thing I do? I go jump on the scale, right? I go jump on the scale to figure out exactly where I am, because I need two things. One, I need to know where I am, and I need to know if any of my efforts or the things I'm trying to do are making a difference or an impact. Because without those two things, and this is where I feel, and I hear a lot in HR and executives within organizations are like, well, we're doing these things and we're taking a lot of actions and we're trying this and we're trying that, and we think it's working. But I say, well, do you know it's working? And if so, how do you know it's working? And that's usually one of the biggest gaps, is that organizations rarely, from my experience, organizations rarely have the ability when it comes to people and culture to quantify those types of things. It's like, well, we think we know, for example, of course, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, huge focus on that this year. And an amazing focus, and what a great opportunity to finally move the needle, because the organization as a whole now is being driven to find ways to align and address organizational issues there. It's the perfect time. You've got to capture this to move that needle. But if you don't have a way to quantify it, then oftentimes we end up with, oh, well, let's try this. We think that this would be a good idea. Based on my conversation with Susan and Steve and Joe or Billy, now I'm going to, that's kind of where my mindset came from, what I think is going to work. And so, hey, do you feel like this would be a good idea? Or you sit in that executive conference room and around the table, and there you say, hey, we think we have an issue here. What are some of the things we could do? And very anecdotally, we end up making a choice or a decision. But is that what our people really needed? Is that what we have identified, and what's the data behind that to support those decisions so that we take the right actions within the company? That's where we really try to come in and help.
Yeah. So my assumption, and a big assumption, is that if people realize, or want to address something, then it's a real problem, right? Where there's smoke, there's fire, right? There's nobody ever says, hey, let's start this and do this and figure it. So there's always there's always a series of triggers that sort of bring a cause or bring an action to the table, right? And so if you're doing anything in DEI, then truthfully, you probably have a bigger problem than you think you do, and then all the more reason why you should probably address it and figure out where your benchmark is. And truthfully, as a human capital professional, take that strategic role on, measuring some of these soft skills with data versus, just like you said, John and Sally think there might be an issue, so let's do something, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And that's where, again, there's such a great opportunity, so needed, especially with the events in the US, right? Major issues. And there always have been, and there's systemic issues, and we need to solve and work to address those. And now is a great opportunity for organizations to really make huge strides in solving this issue and problem. But what is the problem is going to be unique and different to every single organization. There is no yes, there's some general best practices or whatever, but every organization and what's going on and the experience that your people are having within your organization is unique. It's different than the next company right around the corner,
Mhm.
because you have different people and that experience and different leadership and the way this has been communicated. So if you want to make a difference, how do you know, not just guess, how do you know where strategically and pinpoint where those issues are within the organization so that you can make the right moves, number one, and number two, figure out where you are so you can make the right moves. Number two, how do we then, as we start to take those actions, how do we know and measure the impact, not just at the end, but all along the way, so that by the time we get to the other end, we know that we're going to see the impact because we've iterated throughout the process to get us there.
Yeah. What's that old expression, right? A goal without a wish, or goal without a plan is just a wish, right?
Right.
So, so and by the way, Anisa and I are also doing a study that hopefully you folks will be able to benefit from. And what we're doing is going to do a survey that goes out, and we're going to ask people how successful they were and what methodology they did to fix this. So one of Robert's really good at pulling in data, but he's not so good at fixing the problem. He's just really good at identifying it. So so hopefully with some of the data that Anise and I pull, we'll get to find out where some of the best practices are that might just make your life a little bit easier when you go down this, go down this plan and figure out if we know, X amount of companies, or 56% of the companies took this action and we're happy with the results, and X percent took this action and we're not happy with the results, then it helps you sort of choose the right methodology to get the end results. And then of course you can still measure that. But So
Yeah,
sorry
and
for the selfless plug there.
and I do agree that there are going to be overall general actions or best practices or things to do, right? But the most impact in addition to that is how to then customize or know what your actual organization needs and what will drive and move that needle within your specific organization. How do I take a generalized best practice of, hey, here's how we do things, here's how we hire people, here's how we train people, here's how we teach and educate, some of those general things. But then how do we now take some of the very strategic actions specifically surrounding what we found with our company? And I wanted, Anisa, I think you had maybe a comment, or sorry,
No,
we
this is
just
all
get going over here. So
no, happy that it's a critical conversation. I think what we're talking about is identifying, as you mentioned, and I've read some of your papers and what have you, and as you mentioned, how can you move the needle if you don't know where the needle is, or if you don't have a needle at all?
correct.
Right? Really important. But here's something that I find that with our clients is often a struggle, right? So discrimination and racism are not always overt bigoted behaviors, right? So it's one thing to be able to recognize a racial slur or marginal, a discriminatory charged joke, right? It's one thing to recognize the obvious, but what about ideologies and the implicit biases that all of us have? None of us are excused from that experience of, ooh, I had one negative experience, therefore everyone that wears pink is a problem, right? None of us are excused from that. So what are the methodologies that you recommend or use to not cross that line into where an organization may be concerned about the legalities of digging up dirt and justifying legal action, for example, versus where are we so you know what problems to solve?
No, I think that's a fantastic question. And that's again where each organization is going to be unique in what they're trying to identify and the methodologies and the way and what they feel like is most important. And frankly, where they are on that level or scale. Some of the things, for example, like you just mentioned, maybe those are step 2 or 3 or 4 in my process, where first I just got to figure out, hey, how are our hiring processes and these different components leading all of this into it. So it's a huge, right? We can go down lots of different directions. But let me share with you, I guess in general, and I think I'll explain the answer to your question by maybe, let me share my screen here and show you kind of how the tool in general works so that you get a sense for that and how then you create and customize your own personal questions. So are you able to see the screen there? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we see it.
So in the Illumo platform, we are really positioned as a tool, right? We are the analytics, a people analytics tool to help you know and understand your people. And I'm logged into a demo account. It's our Dunder Mifflin in account. It's our office account based on the sitcom or the TV show, The Office. So this is a demo account. So don't look at any of the actual data or things like that in the platform here, but I want to help you understand kind of what we do. And I'll describe it this way first. And that is that we help organizations to take a systematic approach to deliver their business results through people analytics. And what we mean by that is that I've always learned that if you don't have a system or a process that gathers insight consistently, then those things drop off very quickly. Well, what is the traditional process that everybody uses to gather insight about their people today? Surveys, right? Let's send out a survey. Let's do an engagement survey. Let's send out a DE&I survey. Let's send out this. We'll ask some questions. Well, why do we do that? Because the intent is for us to listen and understand and get a sense of insight so that then, of course, we can make the right choices and decisions. It's my personal belief that the traditional survey process, though, is one of the most ineffective, frankly, within an organization. Because by the time we figure out what questions to ask, go out and ask the questions, bring them back, get some level of insight, but we didn't really get enough. So then we start doing focus groups to try to actually engage with people and talk to them about these things so that we can learn. And then hopefully out of there, figure out some actions. And then from there, now start taking and creating some action plans. Well, in a lot of organizations, that can take 6, 12 months, right? To try to start taking action. Well, then your people feel like, well, what are we doing solving problems that were our problems a year ago? And the problems changed by now, like, anyways, I won't get into my whole thing, but we really look at ourselves as, yes, we ask questions, but we're the anti-survey platform. And the way that we ask questions and gather insight is critical. So what we do is we ask a single question every single week from each individual throughout the organization. Those questions are question sets based on, we worked with organizational psychologists to help us understand the entire experience that somebody is having within your organization. Now, today's focus is going to be on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. But you'll see in here, that's one of the many categories that we have within the platform. So we measure, alignment and COVID and the customer and engagement and leadership and mental health and all of these different things, new hire and termination and, their social and community systems, teams, well-being, all of these different things, right? So we measure all of this. The way that we measure is by creating questions. So let me pop back up here. So I'm going to come into this. And you can see they're all over the chart, right? For how they're responding. That's not normal. Most organizations, it's much smoother, but of course the office, those guys are all over the place. So what we did then is we said, okay, well, what are the things that we want to know? And we built some of those that every organization wants to know within the organization into our general sets of questions. But then each organization can also add. So, a moment ago when you said, well, hey, what if we're trying to figure out, these aspects of this or that? Well, what we do is we help you to identify what those are, what's most important to you. And then we just work with you and build customized metrics and a custom way to measure this. And our methodology is threefold that we use here. So what I do is I ask questions surrounding, for example, is this a priority do you feel like this is a priority for the organization? And we ask a couple questions that are scale based. On a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rank or rate this specific thing? Those questions that are scale based then deliver these actual numbers and metrics. And as you can see, they also benchmark you against other organizations in your same industry and size that are on the platform. So those deliver the numbers. And that's really helpful for us to see, hey, look, here's how now. So now we start getting this scale. But it's not a one-time thing. Again, it's every single week. I'm getting asked one question. It's quick and easy. So, on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate the priority that you feel like the organization places on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? And I rate that. It takes me 3 to 5 seconds. So it had to be simple and easy. So also, just a quick side note, the way we ask those questions can be on wherever your people are. So if you live in Slack, we'll ask them in Slack. Teams, we'll ask them in Teams. If you, a lot of people have remote workforces and things like that. So frankly, one of the most powerful has been just send a text. We ask through a simple text. We just ask a question and get a really quick response. Well, those create the numbers. But then what we recognized is that that's helpful because now it pinpoints for me. Like if I go look at, let me see if I've got over here in reporting. In the reports, for example, I can look by teams or departments or locations, and I can identify, all of these beautiful dashboards and visualizations of the organization, helping me to see, hey, look, let's take a look at these different teams, and it pinpoints for me where to focus my efforts. But then the most important thing comes from, instead of just the, like one other thing I'll show you real quickly here in the platform is, once I get the numbers and I identify, hey, look, what are my high impact or my low impact scores, and where is all this data coming in, and I can see that, then the most important thing becomes the why behind the numbers. And what I mean by that is that we take, again, that conversational approach. So our other questions are designed as conversation starters. So our intent is to now essentially have a live focus group with them, so that if we ask them a question, then I'm able to, and they respond, then our teams respond to them to learn about it. For example, hey, what's the one thing you would do to improve your team? And I saw one that came back recently and said communication. Well, what does that mean? And what is that going to do? And what do I need to do to make that better? So what we do is we engage in those types of questions. Hey, thanks for your response. Help me understand how or what surrounding communication we can do better as an organization to improve on this. And they respond and say, okay, well, it's this, and here's what I was thinking. And we have this conversation. Well, 5, 6 levels deep into that conversation, I now have tactical insight, not just a high level response, but tactical insight. So what we did, the reason I share all of that with you is so that you can see that there's 2 real pieces that I see, or that we have built for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. One is a first set of primary questions about how people view this within the organization. So we're getting scores, and we're also getting live feedback. And then my favorite question set that we use is that one thing question, where we ask, well, what is the one thing that you would recommend to the organization to help us improve in this specific area? So on the front end, it's this. On the back end, we have our risk mitigation campaign. And I wanted to show you inside here as well, because in the risk mitigation campaign, what's core and critical here are, now we're looking at all of the protected classes, and we're identifying where you have gaps in a proactive way. So there's 2 sides, the proactive, and I wouldn't necessarily categorize this as reactive, but what are the problems if we don't solve this? Gender equity or racial inequity and all of those things. Well, in order to take and make the right moves, again, we need to get data and insight and numbers that help us identify where we are. But most importantly, we need to have those conversations with our people to listen and understand why they feel like we are where we are, and what we can do as an organization, and what they would recommend to help us improve in these areas based on listening and understanding the experiences that they're having. So these are the 2 different aspects that are built in, ready to go, plug and play right out of the platform. And then, like you mentioned, and this is where now you can build those custom metrics. And what we share with organizations is, look, start with these. This is a great place to get a great baseline and a good understanding of what's going on within your organization. But then from there, as you listen and learn, then now, you can create some of these core aspects. So now you decide, hey, look, here's some core pieces. Here's some of the action plans we want to do. We've engaged with our people. We know that these are the right moves that we need to make. But now we want to measure the impact of these specific either behaviors or mindsets or understandings or beliefs. Well, I can put a needle on anything. And so what we do is work with you then to create those question sets and help you identify the best way to do that, so that you can now measure the impact as you're moving forward within the organization. So sorry, I get rolling and I get a little too much. So please, I'll pause for a moment. I know that was a lot, and I kind of gave you the whole enchilada, but hopefully it makes sense. And please ask me questions surrounding that.
Yeah, every time I have a conversation with you, Robert, I always think that you should adopt the Albert Einstein hairdo, right? Just like this mad scientist.
I do have a couple of questions, but I'll wait.
Please.
David, did you have a question?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay. I'd love to hear a little bit more. A lot of organizations are struggling with convincing, right, those who need to have buy-in that an investment in benchmarking is worth it, right? Perfect example of the conversation that I had maybe last week, maybe the week before. But it was, we don't need to benchmark. We don't have that big of an issue. And we're really diverse. So I don't see why we need to spend money on the front side. I think let's just have a 60-minute training session on this. Right. And so a lot of training organizations will just say, okay, that's fine. We can do it once and done if that's what you're looking for. But what you've just shared is so much more valuable, to even validate, is that accurate? Maybe it is. Maybe they are the sole organization in all the world that has no issues. They've already solved them all. There's no biases, right? That'd be wonderful. But how do you make the case when someone doesn't even understand the benefit of identifying what's the original benchmark?
Oh, I love that question, because it's like, especially for HR and people leaders, it's one of the most difficult things that they struggle with is, they're very close in many cases through anecdotal and other insights and everything else they've got, right? They have a really good pulse and understanding of what's going on in the organization. But now the problem is that now, how do you go take that and convince the executive team within the organization that what you think and what you're feeling and what now needs to be done? And that's why I love to share that the language of business, it's numbers.
Yeah.
The language of business is numbers. And so if you don't have a way to quantify your people and culture into a number and deliver that to your executive team, you will always struggle, because bottom line, you have to build a business case. You've got to build a business case that shows the value of why you need to take these actions within your organization. And that's why that's where I come from. I've ran organizations in that executive leadership for most of my career. And it's always been the biggest problem. In fact, it's why we created this tool, because as an executive leader that had a high focus on people and culture, and someday I'd love to, my journey through getting there, right, to help me understand it. But based on that, I never had the data and the insights, and where I always felt like, look, we're taking actions, but we can't prove why we're taking them, what the results of those. It was just like, oh, well, here, trust us. We just know that this is important and this is what we should take. And it's not that I didn't trust them that was the right actions to take, but it's difficult when you can't see it. And I had no way to know or prove it. I had a CHRO a couple of weeks ago, almost in tears with me. And she says, look, you have done what I could never do. And I said, well, that sounds awesome. What was that?
What was it?
And she said, when I was able to go in and take the heat map and show them, it was literally her quote, and I have it in my presentation now, that says, it was like taking the blindfold off for the executive team. Because when I could show them in hard numbers, not just what I was saying, and it wasn't that they didn't trust me or believe me, but they didn't have any way to validate or show or identify or tactically assign that, where everything else they do is based on, look at all the BI tools and they can see every number and every projection and everything that's coming. Well, when I could now deliver for the first time that same level of tactical insight with, here's exactly where the numbers are, and now let me show you some of the conversations we're having and why people feel the way they do. Well, she's like, it changed everything for me. Now, for the last several meetings that I've had with the executive team, I can't stop getting them to take a look at my numbers, right? And in fact, it's like, well, hey, how do we fix that? I see this team. Oh, we're having leadership problems over here. How do we solve that? Boom, 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 boom. It became visible. I think you've hit one of the biggest things on the head, is that, like, how do we get these things done within our organizations? And so many people go into HR and people and culture to drive the organizations with all these great ideas and passion for it. And then frankly, they get crushed by executive teams that won't and don't prioritize it. But I say, sitting on both sides of that fence, I say to HR, and if there's anything that hopefully our tool delivers to you, is that you also have to recognize that your job is to show them how this impacts the business and to quantify that for them. And that's why we've created this tool. We've created this tool so that we can help you to do that. Because yes, they need to take those different strategic actions. Yes, you need to identify and help the organization, because I firmly believe that organizations, especially as we move forward, that organizations, everything is built on people. And that people war is about to get serious. It's about to get real. That's going to be our next epidemic, is because if organizations don't change and transform in a modern way and learn how to support their people, why is diversity, equity, and inclusion becoming so important? Because people's mindsets, their beliefs, we all know that that needs to change. This cannot stay the way it has. We need to make it change, and we need to make an impact and have meaningful change. And if your organization is one that doesn't prioritize this, well, guess what? I'm not going to work for you. I'm going to go work for the company that does, because I know that they value their people. I know that their policies are fair. I know that if I work at that organization, they're going to value me. Well, I'm going to attract the right talent, right? It's all going to come down to your business results. And that's where I share everything's about business results and driving the business. That's where HR tactically needs to get in line with delivering that so that they can strategically help the organization. Sorry, you got me all fired up again.
Well, and historically, that has been, one of the biggest knocks on HR, right? Is just not having good statistical data to get them into, into that C-level, conversation, right? So there's definitely power behind that, and then as to further on some of the things that you just said, Robert, in the conversation earlier with Maureen, she talked about how some of these things will be real, and companies like Glassdoor are going to start to track some of these and measure some of this. So it will affect your ability to retain and hire new talent, right? So it's super important to address it long term.
I have a couple other questions about your methodologies. So one thing
Yes,
that's
please.
really important in surveys and is confidentiality. Whereas it's also important to understand, okay, what does my operational business unit look like? What does my administrative business units look like? I sure would like to know how this finance department inside this business unit is doing. What's the level of confidentiality versus collective or aggregate insights that a company can glean when they use Olumo?
Yeah, probably the best way to describe that is to share this again, because that is, especially with your people, right? There's always a level of mistrust, if you will, within an organization surrounding anonymity. And if I say something, am I taking a personal risk as an employee within your organization? Am I taking a personal risk by telling you what's really going on, because somebody could find that out, figure out it was me, and then I get fired? And I wish, and we're hoping to drive to a world, right, where that doesn't exist, but it does. And that's why we take anonymity extremely critically. In fact, systematically, it's programmed into the platform where you can't identify right down to an individual person. And the way that we do that and protect that is, you'll look here in this conversation that's going on, and again, they're out of Scranton, and this is a male. I'm not seeing the team that they're assigned to and some of the other aspects that could also populate. But the only reason I see is because there's at least 5. So we protect down to a level of 5. Well, we always protect, but we don't show tags down to a level of 5. So in Scranton, there's at least 5 people in Scranton, and there's at least 5 males within Scranton. I'm not now showing you what team or department are, because there's not at least 5 males that are also in that specific department. Excellent. Or that type of thing, right? So that's where programmatically, it's just built into the platform where it's physically not possible. And people ask questions of me all the time. Well, do people trust that? And I say, well, it's my belief that trust is always earned. And so what we do is we help them to see it. We're very open. We can show and explain to them exactly how the platform works on everything, every communication we send out. We remind them, hey, this is anonymous unless you choose to self-identify or something like that. So we do it at every single level. But then what really makes the big difference on that is literally just earning their trust. And that takes time, and sharing and showing that. One of our things that we do right out of the gate is when we launch the platform, we encourage an organization, hey, you want to take some things and we'll identify some places you're doing well and some positive comments where you're doing great. But we also want to share very openly and candidly some of the places, some of the ugly places too, right? And we want to share that throughout the organization. And we do that very quickly and encourage them to do that, so that then we show and start building that trust. Well, how do we know that it's okay to say things very direct or candid? Because the company showed us it was, because they showed us some great comments, and they also showed us some that were very direct comments that we all know are problems here, but wow, somebody actually said it and that was okay. And the company's putting it up on a pedestal to say, yes, this is okay, right? So you create an environment of trust by building it. And that's one of the things that we help you and help organizations to do. So I think it's a great question, though, because anonymity is always an issue or a concern.
So that leads me to another one, which is rate of response, right? You had mentioned, so I have two questions around that. You had mentioned it's very quick, it's small questions each week that over time lead you to this data. Well, if I'm starting an initiative and I want to start it in June, how do I get the condensed data up front that I need to, maybe it's a strategy session, so I need the data from the group to present, here's where we are by June, which might be 3 weeks away. How does it work when I need fast data as opposed to shorter, longer term?
Great question. Yeah. So what we do to give you initial benchmarks is instead of the once a week, it's the only time we do it. But the first time, well, I shouldn't say the only time, but in general, it's the way the process works. Is that we launch with a subset of 12 questions when we first launch the platform. So the first time you get a link, a text, or however the methodology again, but it comes as a link and you click on the link and that opens up and you answer 12 questions. After that, then generally, and again, you can adjust this as an organization if you want them to get them every couple weeks or even more or whatever, right? So, but our typical standard that we see and what works really well is once a week, we ask a single question. So ongoing, we get that. Well, by asking 12 questions of everybody in the organization, we get enormous amounts of data and insight surrounding all of this. And that's where again, our most effective has been text, because if we send them out, we've noticed that when we send them out via text, we literally within 24 hours, all of our dashboards, everything's filled up. We have crazy amounts of data and insight and feedback that's coming in. We're having great conversations. It's amazing. It's just a little bit slower with some of the other methodologies, but whatever works for your organization. But that's where, we get this huge amount of data and insight so that you can have those immediate benchmarks within because you need that. And then it's intended that the ongoing really is there to just see, hey, how are we trending? Where are we going? Are we going up or down or why? And be able to identify those trends. In most cases, of course, that's what we're looking for, is the trends, right? We're not looking to, based on one comment that somebody makes, go create this whole initiative or do something. Although I will share just a quick story of when that can come into play. So another client a few weeks ago. So as we gather all this insight, every single day, whoever's an administrator within the platform or set up at that level receives a daily email that shares with them all of the comments and the feedback that's coming in. Well, the CEO of this company loved being on that email, loved having that consistent insight. He's like, man, this is the most amazing thing because it's like I get every single day, I just get a pulse of where we are and what's happening. Well, over the weekend, a comment came in from an individual that said, I thought we were this type of company and I feel like we're this type of company because I'm on bereavement leave. The company only gave us 3 days off. Those were unpaid days. I'm still sitting here trying to bury my loved one and stressing about work and money and all these other things. And this is a terrible policy and it's not who I believe we are. Well, the CEO sees that comment. He's going through over the weekend, looking at the comments and seeing how he sees that comment, calls up the HR director and says, we have to change this immediately. This is so spot on. This is not who we are. And that policy is not in alignment of where we should be. Changed it over the weekend, had them message back to the person, because it's anonymous. We don't know who this individual is. Thank you so much for your comment. We appreciate your feedback. Based on your feedback, we're actually making an immediate change. So please reach out to HR and they will reimburse you. We've now made a change to 5 days bereavement, boom, boom, boom. So normally that's not the case. That's not what we're typically looking for. It's trends and looking at things over time. But there can be things like that are huge gaps that literally they just didn't recognize and put the two together of our policy and who we say and what we say we are and how that shows up for our people. And so they made that change. Well, how did that change get made? Well, it was able to be seen by the executive levels that saw the impact and could see it finally. They had never seen it. They didn't see how that impacted their people. So again, it's like taking the blindfold off. Well, once you can see how the things that you're doing as an organization are impacting your people, how better than to get the leadership and the executive teams within your organization to take action. In most cases, it's not like, it's funny. Some people paint them as, oh, well, the company will never do this or whatever. Well, that's because they haven't seen really the impact. Oftentimes, I believe that that's why some of those choices or policies are in place, is they literally just don't recognize the impact. And when you can help them to see it, that's where we can make a difference.
That's great.
Sorry, long story again.
I think you hit it on the head. We're coming to the close of our time together. One thing that I'd love to just kind of accentuate of what you said is that understanding where an organization is and how the people view the organization, and then ensuring that HR team can read the data in such a way as to respond promptly. Especially when it's low-hanging fruit. If all we have to do is look at this and make a decision to align our policy more appropriately with our values, boy, let's make that happen. It goes a long way towards internal brand management. So I really appreciate that story you shared.
Yeah, I think if I can maybe be just really real about some of this, right, is that statistically, and obviously we're working to change this and organizations are working to change this, but statistically, executive or CEOs, there's a huge statistic that those are primarily white, right, within an organization. And they're being asked to lead and drive diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging initiatives that frankly, many of us have not had that type of an experience, or our experience is very different than the people within the organization that we're working to help and support. That's why critical feedback like this, I believe, is so important. It's not that the choice in many cases was, hey, let's make these choices, but we didn't recognize the impact of not making these choices or decisions, right? And this is one of the greatest ways when you're talking about, once again, going back to how do I make this a priority in my organization? You need to show them it's a problem. Back to what David, you said earlier, right? You don't fix things that you don't perceive as a problem. So they're not going to take action and move the needle on these things if they don't see there's a problem. Well, the best way I can help you to identify and show that is through actual feedback and the impact and the comments and the conversations that are being had here. Yes, the data will pinpoint, But the most impactful thing that we will show and deliver to your organization is the actual comments, the feedback, the conversations we're having with your people. That's what's going to change. That's what's going to change mindsets. That's what's going to change beliefs. That's where I think we can have the greatest impact and help organizations to move forward within these things and prioritize it, is once they can see it and understand it.
Beautiful. Great. Great. All right, for those of you who've been on the call with us, please do type into the chat box. Let us know maybe one takeaway that you have gleaned from our conversation today. If you have questions, please do let us know. I'm the never-ending questioner. My children call it annoying. My husband just tunes it out at this point. He is like, I'm not listening. I'm not answering any more questions. Stop with the interrogation. So you just tell me when you've had enough. But I do have a question about, that frontline 12 questions. I want folks to walk away with, if you're going to do this on your own, if you're not going to engage technology like Ulumo, what exactly do they need to be asking? What are the, pardon the dogs, or what are the categories in which HR needs to be paying attention to?
Well, and that's where, as we created the primary categories, our ultimate goal is to help organizations understand that entire, we like to call it the human experience at work, right? And we believe that we're transitioning to where we need to take a human approach and understand the human needs and aspects of our people and their lives, and that they bring their whole lives to work, right? And until it's kind of Maslow's, hierarchy of needs, once people can move beyond just making sure that they feel safe and secure, then they can start delivering their whole heart and souls into your organization. But that you have to create an environment or a workplace experience, a human experience at work that helps them to get there. But when I come to this and look at, so yes, we asked 12 questions. What are the most important? Well, that's going to be identified by what experience campaigns, and again, where they feel like they're ready and prepared. Because the other key piece of this is that I firmly believe that you don't ask questions surrounding aspects that you're not ready and willing to take action on, right? So if you are, for example, not ready to take action on social and community issues or something like that, then let's start with some of the question sets that you are. And then later, as we move forward, then we'll get there. Then we'll start asking questions about that. So that's one of the things that we provide and lead and guide people with. Outside of that, once you turn on those experience campaigns, we randomize those 12 questions surrounding all of those different experiences. Mm-hmm. So if you're, some companies, and it's also based on data and how large you are. For small companies that work with us, if you're 100 employees, well, you can't turn on all 13 and we can't get enough statistical data, right? So what we do is we minimize that down to, hey, let's pick the 4 or 5 that are most important. We'll start with those, and then we can rotate on a quarterly basis or whatever the strategy may be for that individual company. But that's where we work with them to identify it, because we want to make sure we get enough data and insight, and we also keep it new and fresh for your people. So that's part of how we work through that. But again, one other thing is that then we can help and build your own custom questions and things like that go into this. For example, we don't have question sets built on organizational values, but that's one of the most important things in my belief, is to track and understand. But the way you define trust is probably different than maybe the next organization defines that. So what we do is we work with them and then just customize and create those specific things. So, that it's a process and it's a journey. And that's where I share with organizations is, this is a journey, and what we are is literally just the data and the insight to help you start making the right choices and decisions, and then see the impact of those to help guide you through that journey, right? It's a process, and it's one that frankly is never ending, but it's a process and a journey to create that type of an organization. A organization that people value, they want to be part of. You're attracting and retaining your talent because people want to be part of the organization you've created. So
Very good.
Imagine how powerful that would be, though, to walk into your executive team, show them a dashboard, how they compare against other places in the industry, link it to retention, to cost per hire, for productivity, and just say, which one of these do you guys want to knock off, over the next 6 months, right? Or where do you want us to put our focus, right? And it would be hard for any CEO not to really go, wow, that's a problem over here, or this is a problem over there. I'm not comfortable with this, and now you effectively you've got budget to take action, right?
yeah, part of the process I work with as we engage with an organization is, okay, what are those, right? Every organization has their goals, their objectives, what they're looking to accomplish and achieve. So if we start there and then just start working backwards, back to, okay, well, what data and insights do we need in order to create this environment that drives our engagement and productivity and these outcomes? What behaviors, beliefs do we need to understand? Well, again, it always starts with the data. You start there. So let's just begin with the end in mind. Stephen Covey said that, right? And you now step back and figure out, okay, well, now tactically, let's get the data and the insight we need to now start creating that experience. So it's a very, it's funny because these things aren't that difficult. It's a simplistic process. But yeah, just gathering the data and the insights so that you don't have to scramble trying to figure it out as you go along. Well, let's just put in something that measures and helps us recognize where we are so that as we take these actions, we can see if we're having the impact. And if not, then we can adjust and iterate along the process. That's what you do. You iterate, you iterate, you iterate. We figure it out piece by piece. And it's just so much faster if we can have the data and the insights from our people that help us make those right choices and decisions. So
Love it.
it's really simple.
Love it.
So
Well, I don't know that we've given folks a way to get a hold of you, or if you have a way for them to experience a demo directly with you. Would you share with folks how to find you and reach out to you?
absolutely. Yeah. So you can either reach directly to me. My email is just robert@olumo.com. You can reach to me there, and you can certainly contact and engage with the organization at olumo.com. And the one offer that I'll make is that I've always believed that one of the pieces with this is your organization has likely never seen anything like this. And so one of the things I would love to offer is I will give you those two campaigns, our diversity, equity, and inclusion campaign. I'll give you our risk mitigation campaign, and I'll give you a free 30-day trial. Let us put it in because again, is that the biggest issue that you're struggling with in your organization? What type of focus needs to be placed on it, how to raise that level of priority, how to get the data and the insights and the feedback. Well, if you're looking to help your organization understand it, then let's give them the data that they need and let's make you the hero. And you can walk in the door with all of that insight and say, okay, you wanted to know where we are on this and how and what we plan to do about it. Well, here's exactly where we are. Here's exactly what people are saying. Here's exactly how they feel. Here's the numbers. And we want to take it from, this to this within 6 months. And here's my plan of how to get us there, because now we know exactly the tactical insights from our people about where our roadblocks are and what we need to solve. And these 4 or 5 things we can do tomorrow and solve them like that. And these others is going to take some longer term strategic planning, bottom, boom, boom, boom. But I'll give you that data because I'm happy to give you my platform for free because our purpose is people and we're here to help organizations and the people within those organizations. And that's what we want to do. Because once we put it in, I promise this will become the tool that they never want to see and they don't know how they could ever do anything without. So we're more than willing to just give it away completely free, money back, 100% guaranteed, whatever, zero commitment, nothing. We don't take a credit card. We're just here to help you. And that's the type of company that we want to be and who we are as an organization. And we believe that we really have created a powerful tool that can benefit your organization.
Beautiful.
Wonderful. Yeah. So if you guys can't find Robert, you can reply to any of the emails that we've sent out, and we'll track you down. We'll get you in the right thing, in the right hands, so you can take Robert up on that offer.
Great.
Such a pleasure to spend time with both of you. Thank you guys today
Likewise.
for facilitating and having the conversation.
Enjoyed it.
I always enjoy listening to you, Robert, and it really is a great thing to see people that are so excited about what they do, right? It's so contagious, and it's good to be a part of it.
Agreed. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, David. Thank you, Robert.
All right, thanks, guys.